Okay, I'm going to double check. I believe we are live. Let's take a look. And if my assistant and partner can please let me know if we are live. All right. Oh goodness, are we live or not? Let's see, let's see. We are. Okay, we are. Yay. Thank you so much for joining in for our LinkedIn Live today. It is a really, really special one. It's a series I call Ask the Author, where I get the pleasure of interviewing amazing authors who have written books about their personal experiences, especially as they relate to cancer or about their experience as doctors or even the healthcare system. So today I am super excited to introduce you to Robin McGee. Robin is a registered clinical psychologist, and she's currently living with cancer. So she's going to tell us a little bit about that, and then we are going to dive in deep with her book, and I'm going to try to show everybody, like, I have pages of notes, so the benefit of reading on Kindle. So Robin, thank you so much for talking to me again and doing a special LinkedIn Live today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I am thrilled. So tell us why you wrote the book. The book, if you see at the bottom, guys, it's The Cancer Olympics. Be sure to check it out. You can get it on Amazon. So Robin, tell us why you decided to write The Cancer Olympics.
Two reasons, but primarily because I wanted to write it as a love letter to my community, the community that's not only gave me personal support, but also sort of took on the government in a patient advocacy effort, and did that 10 years ago, and again during this pandemic just recently to save my eyesight.
I was so impressed with your community. So can you tell us a little bit about, so people can get some context about where you live and how the community you live in is quite small, and also how did they rally during your cancer diagnosis and most recently? Like, how did that happen?
Well, I ought to say that back when the story took place, Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of social supports weren't really developed. And so as a consequence, the only thing we had really was email. And as everybody knows who's had a cancer diagnosis, it's torment to email each person individually with your horrendous story. So what I opted to do is sign up for a support website called Lots of Helping Hands. And that was a website that allows people to communicate directly and privately with the cancer person. But the cancer person can ask a community, can you help me with gardening? Can you drive my kid to this? Can you help me get to chemo or radiation? Those kinds of things. So it was a way of soliciting support from a community. And in my case, in the case of this community, it turned into a community of people who then were willing to go an extra mile in terms of political advocacy for an issue that came up around my treatment in the province.
So I want to ask you about this. You say very early on in the book that patients have no control, that we are at their mercy. And one of the things that ties into what you just said about patient advocacy, but shocked me the most, is I think when people think about healthcare in Canada, we probably should mention that you live in Canada. When people think about healthcare in Canada, at least we Americans, we hear single payer system, national healthcare, and we assume, or at least I did, that treatment would be the same across the country. But you say very clearly that there is no national standard of care in Canada, and living or dying depends on where you live, or as I like to say, your zip code. Can you break that down for us? Just tell us, because it surprised me tremendously how different the treatment was from one province to another.
Yes, well, and remember, this book was written in 2000. Well, it was published in 2014. So, but it describes events from 2010. So, in 2010, there was no national decision-making standard around chemotherapy. Each province did it separately because, as you may know, in Canada, the health is administered by each province individually, and there isn't unlike, say, the UK, it's not a national health service in the sense that everyone gets the same care. Now, there's aspects of the Canada Health Act that allow people who can't get the care they need in one province to travel to another, but it's obscure and hardly anyone knows how to access that. and get through the red tape of it. But so I would say that in 2021, there are developing national standards for oncology in Canada, but back then there was not. It was done by each individual province, which would form a committee, and each committee would decide what was in and out of the formulary. And by the formulary, I mean how the assignment of the health budget for each province.
It's interesting. It's very much like the continual debate we have in the US, right? Whether it's states' rights versus federal rights. It's kind of,
Precise.
yeah. So please tell us what happened that made you really go up against the government. Can you break that down for us?
Well, I was, like you, completely horrified to find out that my province of Nova Scotia did not, in 2010, have the best standard chemotherapy. In fact, an international standard of chemotherapy for my kind of cancer specifically. And so it was available everywhere else in Canada and in the States and in Europe and Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Germany, everywhere. Everyone had adopted this particular chemotherapy to be used for very high risk cases. And this is just for people who are, it's FOLFOX chemotherapy for rectal cancer. And so, but my province had made the decision that because rectal cancer patients got radiation, which colon cancer patients typically don't get, that they said, well, you're already getting extra treatment, so we're not allowing you to have access to this particular drug. We don't think it's much superior to just giving someone 5-FU, which is what they used to do, just 5-FU. But of course, the research was so unequivocal in proving the superiority of FOLFOX relative to just 5-FU that every other nation in the world said, we're not even going to do the research. It's obvious from the preliminary studies. So it was a case of a treatment being so good that it sort of skyrocketed past limited sighted decision makers couldn't see it. It was so much everywhere. And anyway, so when I learned that, I said to my community, well, maybe what I can do is write to the Minister of Health of the province and sort of beg. So I did. And then what happened is they in the community, then they started writing all these letters. Ultimately, I think I believe I heard that they got in around 400 letters, saying saying you need to bump up the standard of care for this kind of cancer and allow this drug to be available for Nova Scotians. And so I don't want to totally give away the story, but we ultimately were successful in our lobbying of the provincial government to make that change. They did add it to the formula, but unfortunately, just too late for me to receive it, like within a month of my under-treatment ending.
So I'm thinking about people I know here and people who have the means to do so. Was there ever this consideration of, well, I'll just move to another province and get it there? Was that even a possibility?
That certainly is something that was in my mind, but I got I would have done that. I would have probably gone to Ontario where my family was. But I also had my own. I had a 13-year-old or 15-year-old at the time. I had a house. I had then moving in with my elderly parents who were already going through a lot on their own with their own illnesses. So it was like that would be spectacularly difficult and stressful to do. So, and not only that, but apparently there can be a lag in getting people who move to a province into that system. And that lag, my oncologist told me at the time, he said, you cannot wait. You cannot wait to do that. You must get treatment right away. And while what I'm giving you is not what I wish I could give you, this is the best we have and you need it right away. And so I couldn't take the time to sort of I couldn't take the time to go do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, totally makes sense. And I just want to quote you as often as I can because Robin is a wonderful writer. She's not just an amazing advocate. She's an incredible writer. And this is from your book. My eyes are opened and the enormity of the flaws of my medical care is heartbreakingly revealed. So can you tell us what you meant, how long it took you to get the test that you needed from the time you had symptoms, And also
Well,
about doctors 1, 2, 3, and 4.
well, I want to make it clear that what I'm about to say about doctors 1, 2, 3, and 4 is nowhere near the standard. That is not the standard of care in Canada. Lest any of your listeners think,
Right.
oh, that's how cancer is approached in Canada. Absolutely not. These people were so far outside the pale of ordinary medicine that they not only were disciplined by the college, but ultimately successfully sued them in a malpractice action, which here in Canada is an uncommon thing to happen.
Wow.
So anyway, so long and short of it is I saw Dr. One. I was 46 and I had daily rectal bleeding. I had an immediate family history of colorectal cancer. My mother had it. And eventually, a couple of doctors in, I even had a positive cancer screening test. And despite all that, they said, no, essentially the message back was cancer screening starts at 50. You're not 50. No scope for you. That was the mentality of the four of them. And so so it took from the time I first went to a family doctor with symptoms to the day that I had a colonoscopy that revealed the disease was well, the standard of care is 60 days. It was 661 days, 22 months. So
20 to almost 2 years.
Yeah, almost 2 years. And in that time, I was diagnosed as being curable stage 3, but in retrospect, surgical evidence proved that I was, and radiology evidence proved that I was actually stage 4 at that point. So I really, really needed that FOLFOX drug, and I didn't get it, which is possibly why I recurred years later.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, that's just shocking, right? But I do appreciate you prefacing it with that's not the standard of care in Canada.
No. And so and that was when at the malpractice lawsuit, the defense could not find one expert anywhere in the world able to defend the standard of care that I received because it was that bad. Not anyone in the world, no doctor was going to say, yeah, 22 months is acceptable for someone who just had a positive cancer test, screening test. So,
and you knew 2 of these doctors professionally,
that's
correct?
right, because of getting back to what you're saying about my community, it's a semi-rural community, probably about 20,000 people in a series of counties. I was kind of well known in the county because I'd been in public mental health and I'd been in public education, so traveling the whole entire width and breadth of 3 counties, being seen all the time in various communities, and and had other things like soccer and stuff that I did that where I met people. And so anyway, it's not like downtown Detroit or something. Right. You'd hear a name and you'd never hear it again. I was on a first name basis with 2 of those doctors, having worked with them for years and years on cases we had in common.
Wow. Back to doctors in general telling patients scary news. You talk about this, and I always find it so frustrating that doctors just speak in euphemisms, or they just throw out numbers, or even worse, they don't talk about it at all to the patient or to the family. I had a doctor at a conference tell me that he would lie to his patients and just stunned me. And I didn't let him leave our booth until he promised me to change his ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do you think doctors should speak to patients?
The way this is how, and this is an exemplar that I heard with my ears by a good family doctor that after I'd gotten away from those 4 and moved on to a man who was very competent, he did it this way. He did it like this. He said, this symptom could be 3 things. It could be it could be, benign, it could be a cyst, it could be cancer. It could be these 3 things. So we're going to rule out the worst one first. So we're going to do a biopsy of that lesion or whatever. So so that's how he would do it. He would just say, with scientifically express, this is the range of possibility. These are the yikes category, and these are the less yikes, but they're all possible based on what we know. So that's the kind of
direct.
Absolutely direct, and to my mind, it is profoundly disempowering to a patient if cancer's in the offing and no one says a thing about it, then
I know.
How can you possibly know, especially when they're all doing things like quitting their practice and stuff like mine did. So if you're going to be, chucking your patients out into the void, you should at least say, "Oh yeah, you could have cancer. Bye." You know.
I had a doctor do that. I was the first, so it was not serious, but first primary care physician I really, really liked, understood my medical history, was really helpful, very direct. And one day she just closed her practice with no notice. Like it just shut down. And I showed up and there was another woman already there and we were both waiting for appointments. And she just poof, vanished, gone. And then months later, I got in the mail all of the records that she had on my health history, but no explanation ever as to what happened. So, Dr. Angela Arango, if you're out there, I still would like to know what the heck happened because it took me a long time to find someone as good as her. All right, so let's talk about Dr. Google because doctors love Dr. Google. And you say the funniest thing, you say that the internet can become a gambling addiction for cancer patients. So tell us what you mean by that.
Well, gambling addictions, I'm a psychologist in my day job, where gambling addiction is fostered, say, for example, by a slot machine, which is, I do this, nothing happens. I do this, do this. Oh, I do this, something wonderful happens. Look at all these coins in my lap. So that is, to me, the exact experience I had as a cancer patient going on the internet. So, okay, well, let's look at the survival value. Oh, that was horrible. Oh, let me go look at that. Oh, no, I told them they got a few months. Oh, this one says that people who are born on Wednesdays have a better chance. Like, you would grab at the slightest thing you could grab on Google to say, you have a chance, you have a chance, you have a chance. And so that's what I mean. It's the researching and striving for hope that we do. And sometimes bad, 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 good, bad, 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 good, good, good. Bad, bad, good, 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 bad, 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 bad. That what they just call that a partial reinforcement schedule. It means that's the best way to make someone addicted is to randomly reward them, as opposed to doing it contingent on.
That's interesting. Specific. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. Yeah, what I tell people is, you're going to find information. There's a like a plethora of information on the internet. That's not the problem, but the information may not apply to you. Often it's difficult to understand, and it's just information. It usually doesn't come with actual action steps. Like, this is how you take charge. So to that point, I'm going to circle back a minute to your community. You had something come up this year, and you rallied your personal community, but also your Twitter community, because you have a pretty big following on Twitter. So tell us what happened this year. It was very recent.
Well, when the pandemic was declared here and around the world in March of 2020, I had an emergency eye surgery canceled because, when all those elective procedures were canceled. And so I was in danger of losing my eyesight. So I would be, legally blind in 3 months and then stone blind in 6 months. So it was like really dire. And so so I was, oh my gosh, how am I, so when I tweeted, gee, the pandemic, there's other things being sacrificed. For example, I'm going to lose my eyesight because I won't be able to get an eye surgery that I needed. And there was this gigantic response to that on Twitter. People were, oh my gosh, you're a cancer patient, you need chemotherapy, you can't have eye surgery when you're on chemotherapy. So, if you did, your outcomes would be awful. So really, we've only got a little window of time to lobby. So by chance it happened that I ended up reaching out to a private ophthalmologist who said, I'd help you if I can, but I can't, I've got to follow the public health order, my practice is entirely closed. But, I'd help you if you could show me that the province will allow you to get this from me, I will help you. I'd be happy to help you. And so then when that went out on Twitter and also to the local community Facebook as well, in this instance, I should also say this wasn't true of my earlier advocacy stories, but it was true of this one, that the media got quite involved. All the major TV stations here in Canada, it was
that's awesome.
Canadian Broadcasting, and then in particular we have a radio show here called White Coat Black Art, which is a national CBC audio program, and several cancer patients who were threatened with dire consequences by the pandemic were covered, and I being one of them. And when the show then called the government to say, "What are you going to do about Robin McGee's blindness, impending blindness?" It definitely created a national pressure on the health system here to address a case like mine. And as we all, I'm not wasn't the only urgent case.
Right.
That was in some ways we're cutting like the boat cutting through the prow of the ice, breaking the ice for other people behind us around desperately needed urgent surgeries that were delayed for that reason. Anyway, so the community lobbied, and
Wow.
long and short of it is that the government did issue. I wasn't going to be using their resources, their PPE, anything like that. I was going to a private clinic. They said, we looked at things, and yeah, we think that's okay as long as the doctor's in agreement. Fill your boots. And so I just before my chemotherapy started, was able to have both eyes corrected, and my vision was saved.
Oh, that's
And that was,
wonderful.
again, through the advocacy of the community, mostly through the local community, because it was aimed at the provincial health authority.
What I love is that they decided it was optional, the surgery, right? And the surgery was to save your eyesight.
Well, yeah, but eyesight isn't your life. There's lots of people with no eyesight who are still alive. So they were like, this is only for life and death. And see, the problem for many physicians is that cases deteriorated over that part. So something that was elective now suddenly becomes urgent because the patient deteriorated.
Yep.
And so, the urgency of a case can change at any time. And that was, physicians were like, what's the rule? How can I get this case declared an exception? So I got all kinds of phone calls and emails from doctors after saying, I saw on the news that you got your eyesight fixed. That's great. Can you tell me how you did that? So because I've got this patient who really needs a surgery, and I don't think I can, I'm not going to be allowed to do it. So I wonder how I can get these, the power to do that. So it was to me, it just raised a question for all pandemic-related planning, that if you're going to have a blanket declaration, you also have to have a process or a policy by which exceptions can be processed.
Wow. It's amazing how stories work, right? Individual stories, even if they're representative of a greater population. And if every person did what you do, I think it completely change cancer care, and not just in Canada, but in the US and maybe any other country. I mean, it really takes that momentum and that will, such a strong will to really make a difference, because what you did has helped other people.
I'm proud to say that over 1,000 Nova Scotians. Remember, we're just little wee province. We're not even 1 million people. So thousands, at least 1,000, 1,200 around that now, of Nova Scotians have had the opportunity to receive the best practice chemotherapy since the days of our advocacy. And who knows, some of those people were going to recur anyway, and some people could be saved by this medication. And so we know that lives were, no question, lives have been saved by those patients now having access to what they need to, the best chance at cure.
I just want to note here, so I'm going to toot your horn for you. In 2015, you were awarded the National Medal of Courage by the Canadian Cancer Society, and that is their highest honor. And I really commend you for it, but it's so well deserved. I mean, really, really, because you've, like you said, you've changed the outcome, you've changed lives by trying to get the treatment that you needed for yourself. And anybody, if you're watching live, or if you're even watching this later and you have a question for Robin, just throw it in the comments and we will circle back. So she is really open, and just, I'm sure she'll answer almost any question you have. I don't want to speak for you. Okay, let's jump into this. So living with the threat of cancer is like being a mountain climber. Tell us what you meant by that.
Well, what I meant was that it's like at the very beginning, you see this incredible mountain you must scale, or like the front of the book shows, Olympic hurdles going off into infinity, and someone facing them. That is what it's like. It's going on and on, or it's a really big ordeal. And then when you get to the top of it, what you ends up, you see a mountain range in the distance with all the mountains you're going to have to scale, not just the first
Right.
one. There's a second one, there's a third one, there's the survivorship issues,
Yeah.
So I've been through all of that stuff. There's the physical side, the emotional side, the sort of spiritual side. There's many, many sides to cancer and many, many mountains to climb
Yeah.
relating to it.
I remember one patient I interviewed said she had this sort of, vague concept of what a cancer diagnosis would be. But when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she said no one told her what a slog it was going to be, which I thought was a great word. Like she had no idea that not only was she going to have treatment in this amount of time, but there was sort of the before and the after treatment and what it, how much pressure it put on her and her family and how exhausting it was.
It was interesting when the front cover of the book showing the hurdles, I would show it to ordinary people, said, "Isn't that a little extreme?" And when I would show it to cancer survivors, they go, "That's it! That's it! That's exactly right! I love this page, Frankie. Look at that!"
And I'm terrified of actual hurdles because I'm really short and I have short legs. And I see hurdles when I watch these Olympians, and I'm just like, oh my God. One of my favorite quotes sort of relates to what you're talking about is it's at least attributed to Muhammad Ali. And it's not the mountain ahead of me, it's the pebble in my shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel. It's like not this mountain ahead of me, it's this thing bothering me right now in this moment. You mentioned just a minute ago spiritual. So that leads perfectly into my next question. And let me preface this by saying that when my sister had cancer, I only prayed twice. And both prayers were near the beginning. And the reason I only prayed twice is because to me, to pray to the God or a God for a miracle, to me implies that that God is capable of doing those miracles, which means that he was also capable of not making sure she never got cancer to begin with. And Harold Kushner, who wrote When Good Things Happen to Bad People, says it much better than I do, but he talks about that issue. And he's a rabbi, and he talks about this idea that praying for a cure doesn't make sense. And you say prayer is selfish, presumptuous, and unreasonable. Tell us what you meant by that.
What I meant by that was, at the time I was diagnosed, there were these terrible earthquakes happening in the Middle East, and people were like, the news was like 10,000 people killed in this in terrible landslides and terrible things. And I'm thinking, how is it? It just seems wrong for me to say, I want to live, me, privileged first world person, want to live, to hell with those people. They said, but all those, it's a, when you mention Harold Kushner, and one of the lines that I like of his, that in one of his other books he writes, God is moral, nature is not. And so cancer is part of nature.
Right.
It is cruel. Nature is very cruel in lots of particulars and in this way. And that we as humans are all subject to it. And divine intervention in our own stories is asking God to contravene the nature that was set in place, and it doesn't work that way, And so what Kushner says is nature is carries a lot of dangers. Where morality comes in is how we as humans have morality. We must respond to the crises that nature presents, whether that's climate change or COVID or whatever it is. So it's up to his idea is that God inspires you and instructs you to be moral, and by moral he means active in helping the planet and helping people escape from some of the cruelties of nature.
God, so well said. Do you think people pray often? Let's say they don't have the cancer; it's a friend or a family member or spouse. They pray to make themselves feel better. Do you think that's why some people pray?
And I can relate to that. Actually, I can understand why. When you're in a state of absolute helplessness, they say no atheists in the foxholes. When people are in a foxhole of distress, either for themselves or for a loved one, to me, it's quite understandable that those are moments of crisis, and in those moments, people do kind of look for help either in terms of the idea being, please make me stronger to meet the crisis, or some are people, please take that crisis away. Well, no, not if it's part of nature.
Yeah. There are no atheists in the foxhole. I've never heard that before. Oh my God, that's so funny. All right. So I love your book for many reasons, because you're a good writer, but also because you really didn't hold back from the story. And you mentioned in your book other books that have helped you. And you mentioned Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel and The Healing Circle. I have not read the latter, but when Adrian was diagnosed, someone gave me a copy of Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And I didn't pick it up for at least a month or more. But when I did, it it helped me so much. And I actually emailed Dr. Siegel and he responded right away, which of course was even better. So tell us why those books and how they helped you.
Dr. Siegel's book was the first book that I ever read of any kind regarding cancer. Another important book for me was called The Anti-Cancer by David Schreiber, a brain tumor patient. And he was someone who also had a cancer diagnosis, as well as being a very accomplished physician and researcher into medicine. And he got very attached to studying issues relating to diet and cancer. So, but Bernie Siegel's book, I guess, was I appealed to me as a psychologist because it was really about that which you can do with your own aspiration, that it can sort of not really, maybe it doesn't really make a difference in outcome, but it certainly makes a difference in your quality of life to practice some of the peacemaking thoughts that he does, and even just the language we use. For example, Bernie Siegel has many patients come in and say, chemotherapy is poison. It's poison for everyone else. It's the elixir of life for you.
Yeah.
And for me. So it's that you don't use that word when you think of it. Try to think of it as healing medicine. That's going to. So this appealed to me as a psychologist, the idea that you could use your mind to sort of reframe what's happening in a way that will make you more comfortable with what's happening. And as we know, there's many kind of suggestibility things. So when they say, the nurse puts the chemo bucket next to the bed and said, you're going to be vomiting all night, so I'm just putting this here. And if you wake up in the morning having not done that, you go, oh, you're actually nervous to think, oh, I'm going to do that all night. That's horrible. But he says, try to operate the other way. Try to see these treatments as benevolent and not as, torture or poisoning or being burned alive, or whatever the kind of analogies people use in their minds for radiation, surgery, and chemotherapy, which are right now the backbone of cancer treatments.
Right. I also love that Dr. Siegel talks about how you're not a number, and doctors love to give out numbers if you let them, but you're not a number. You're an individual. You're a person. And you have to focus on that. And I also want to share with you, we have a comment, God, nature, morality. What a great conversation. Thank you, Catherine, so much. And we have about 12 minutes left. So please, if you have any questions for Robin, put them in the chat. And even if you're watching this later, put them in the chat. I'll make sure she gets them. Let's move on to one of the things that just struck me the most. And you say it very early in your book, but I thought it would be a good way to start to wrap up. When you have a cancer diagnosis, you hear your own eulogy before your death. Tell us what you meant by that.
That refers to when people hear cancer, as you do when you're first diagnosed and you don't know anything, they assume you're going to be dead within a couple of weeks. So they feel that they have to share with you what you meant to them, which is really, in one way, you're really, you're thrown off balance by your diagnosis, as are they. Yeah. So some people sort of impetuously say these things, and in one level, it's incredibly, human and touching and sweet and all of that. But on another level, it's like, I just heard I was diagnosed. I'm not in hospice yet.
I'm still here.
Yeah, and then there's a scene in the movie 50-50 where someone comes up to John Cusack is playing the person with a cancer patient, and people, oh, buddy, goodbye, buddy, patting him on the back. He's He'd only been diagnosed a few days.
Oh
So
my
it was
God.
people just,
Right?
yeah. So that's the analogy that it was. So I remember saying to this phrase here, your eulogy before your death, to another psychologist who herself had cancer, and she said, she had all kinds of people come out of the woodwork and tell her all kinds of things and send her these long emails that were very, it was so good to know you. I'm so sorry I'll never see you again. Like remarks like that were just, we're funny and we're laughing, but we're also, shocking at the same time.
Um,
So,
so I have to do a shout out to Victoria Ann, or Vicky. When she talked about this issue, when she was diagnosed, people just expect her to be dead within weeks. And one person asked, this was their response: "What are you going to do with your jewelry?" They wanted her jewelry. She just, I mean, like,
oh my.
it's so crazy. Like, you can't even make this stuff up. I always say truth is really stranger than fiction, but they asked her, "What are you going to do with your jewelry?" She's alive and kicking. She's doing just fine.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that
Uh,
hilarious?
yeah, Adrienne always observed that cancer made her popular. Like crazy popular, especially at the beginning, the initial diagnosis. I mean, the amount of people coming to visit her got so overwhelming for me, for the staff, probably for anyone except her, that we had to have a new rule where it was 2 people for no more than 20 minutes, because it's got crazy how many people would be in her room at one time. And you know, I think what was hard for me, and I'm curious if you've experienced this, is that I knew those people would not be around forever. I knew that this was sort of the height, all these kids, especially the ones her age, coming to visit her, but I knew that that popularity, if you will, would wane. And you had such an incredible community. I'm just curious, have you seen people sort of drop off for no reason, or experienced anything like that?
I think with all cancer patients say this. They say the people who step up sometimes are people you never thought, you never
Yeah,
knew, and other people who you really thought would be there take off their heels as fast as they can go to
yes.
get away. So I, like anybody else, had those experiences, but I've tried to kind of keep my popularity, if you like, with the community alive by I send out a message to the Robbins Cancer Olympics community, and then now that there's Facebook, I posted and that through my website, and my website is thecancerolympics.com. And what I do there is I approach my cancer experience that I'm undergoing right now as through the lens of great rock songs. So famous
I
songs
love
like
that.
All Along the Watchtower, like there's got to be some way out of here. that kind of thing. So that's a way people now tell me that I have kind of more followers than I did then, partly because social media has allowed for that, but also because people are curious, what's the next song going to be? Oh, Cat Stevens, look at that. So it's
Okay, so for people who didn't hear that, thecancerolympics.com is Robin's website. That's where you can reach her. I highly recommend you buy the Cancer Olympics. It's available on Amazon, and I'm sure other retailers as well. And I'm going to ask you sort of a nerdy question, since you brought up the song lyrics. And this is just like pure nerd. Sorry, we're going to talk about writing for a second and not cancer. But so I thought it was really interesting. So in your book, because you quoted a song sort of beyond what's acceptable, because quoting song lyrics in a book is a really big deal. And actually, one of the close to the end final edits I had to make in my book was I had to take out all the song lyrics, and I used quite a bit because my sister loved music and she was a musician. And in fact, I had one whole chapter framed around Reach Out and Touch Faith by Depeche Mode. Like, I had a whole chapter framed around that. And so I'm just curious, did you get permission for the lyrics? I think it was.
I actually did.
You
I
did?
consulted
Oh
a
my gosh.
lawyer about how to do that. And she said, you actually have to reach the artist,
Yeah.
and the artist or their manager, whoever holds the copyright to those materials, has to review exactly how you plan to use them, and then you have to have their okay. So I did do that. So that was Bruce Coburn for Lord of the Starfields, and also the Sexy Crazy Cancer. I forget her name right now. That quote about carving the Christmas turkey and thinking about what's going to be on your tombstone. That
That's
she's
funny.
a marvelous book, a marvelous approach to the cancer experience.
That's funny because I actually said in my book at one point, and I didn't say her name or anything, but I just said, like, I don't think it's sexy,
No, no,
like,
no. I
like
think
it's not
that's satire.
sexy.
That
Okay.
was a satirical It was a
Right.
satirical title,
I
so
know.
that's why I burst up laughing reading it because that's the least sexy thing
I
there
know,
is.
right?
So it's
So we're wrapping up. Rolf says, great conversation. Thank you. Great to see you again, Rolf. Facial hair, loving it, loving it. But I want to add one more thing that I didn't have, but it just struck me because I remember we talked about this. So many people say cancer is a gift. It was a gift. I wouldn't take it back. La, 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 la. I know your opinion, but I want to hear you say it. Robin, is cancer a gift?
no, not at all. I would never give it to you. This is not a gift. And this comes from Sexy Crazy Cancer, actually. It's the fish. Oh, a carcinoma. You shouldn't have.
Which is a solid tumor for people who aren't familiar with that
Right.
term.
Right. One last thing I'd like to make is I
Please.
just want to make people to know that the proceeds, the money for the Cancer Olympics makes it go towards cancer support programs. So that's that's the point I wanted to make for those who go
So
ahead to purchase it.
so generous, so generous. Once again, guys, I can't recommend this book enough because I read a lot of books. I read a lot of medical memoirs, like the genre. I love it. And so much of the time, people gloss over stuff, and Robin doesn't. I mean, there's bad, but there's a lot of good too. But she doesn't gloss over how difficult cancer is, and that it's not a gift. It's just not. I love the way you phrase, like, I'm just going to give you a tumor. Okay. So please, if you want to reach Robin, buy her book, The Cancer Olympics. It supports all the proceeds support cancer organizations hand selected by Robin. Please go to her website, thecancerolympics.com. And if you're watching the replay, please put in the comments, and if you can, tag me or tag Robin, and that way we get notified and we can answer any questions that you have. Let's see, we have one more. Cancer sucks. I'm so glad to hear this perspective. Thanks, Robin. Yes, right? Isn't she amazing? Yes.
Yeah, how as everybody and their dog is told to be positive when you get a diagnosis, and I'm just saying as a psychologist that to do that relentlessly is impossible, and
Yeah.
in fact a suppression of what you must feel. You must feel fear and anxiety. You are in danger. It's
Yeah.
right for you to feel that way. Mother Nature designed you to feel that way. Don't beat yourself up for having those emotions. So anyway,
Aw.
that's another little piece I
Oh.
like to share.
Yeah, I like to tell people that, the one good thing about anger is it means that you're in reality. Like, you've accepted what's happened, not accepted, but you understand that you have this diagnosis. You're not in denial, because if you're angry, you're motivated and often want to do something. So even anger is okay. It's all right to be angry. It's
And I
fine.
certainly was angry because of the medical malpractice aspects of my case. So
Oh, yeah.
that was another reason for reading the book, because the unusualness of that, plus the unusualness of the advocacy fight, I thought raised the narrative a little bit beyond just my own personal survival.
Yeah, you really, when you read Robin's book, you really start to hate doctors 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I just love that you call them that. Like, I just changed the doctors' names in my book, but I just like doctors 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much, Robin, for coming on and just like digging deep into your book. I enjoyed it so, so much. And if you write in this genre, if you write cancer memoirs, or you write about our healthcare system and you want to do Ask the Author, please just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a private message, and we can schedule you. I try to do LinkedIn Live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I love to do things like this where I get to interview people and just enjoy myself. And I promised I was going to do this. We have 1 minute left. I was going to tease you guys that I'm day drinking, but I'm not. This is actually ginger ale. My tummy's upset, but just wine. Robin, if people want to reach you directly, what is the best way?
Through the website. So it's there's a contact on the menu of my website, cancerolympics.com.
Great.
The Cancer Olympics, all one word.
TheCancerOlympics.com. Click that contact button and reach Robin. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next week for another LinkedIn Live and YouTube and Facebook.